Have you ever felt like grief comes with anxiety, numbness, shutdown, or sudden triggers? And maybe you're starting to think, why can't I get it together? Am I crazy? What's going on? Well, today I am going to be talking with a trauma counselor whose name is Erica Fulbright. She's also an evangelist, she's a chaplain, but today we're going to focus on her as a skilled trauma counselor who's going to talk about how trauma can show up while you're grieving and what's happening in your brain and your body. And she's going to give us some simple tools that we can use right away. All right, Erica, I am so glad that you are joining us on today. Welcome to the Woman Arise podcast. And you are my first guest. So I am
Hi.
simply excited. Yes, I'm simply excited about what you're
Mhm.
going to share with us on today. So just giving that brief introduction, if you want to tell us a snippet of 10 seconds about yourself, but we're getting ready to jump in here. So you guys, please stay on. Do not jump off. If you do, you're going to miss it. And I just want you to know that this is going to be impactful and powerful for you today.
Well, thank you, Tonya. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I'm just simply a woman that has suffered trauma like everyone else. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and my journey with trauma really dealt with my health issues. And by the grace of God, I've come out of that. I'm still healing, but that's why I became a trauma healing counselor. And I just desire to help people to get through their trauma and to be their best self and go be their best self in this life because everybody deals with some sort of form of trauma. And it's simply trauma is just simply a reaction to a life changing event, which we all face, we're dealing with today, the topic of grief.
Right. And I know you've also experienced grief yourself. You've lost your mom. Is that it?
Yeah, both
Yeah.
my parents,
Both your
absolutely.
parents, right? So I'm a widow. I've lost my husband, but I've also lost my father and other family members, grandparents, and sister-in-law, brother-in-law. So I'm acquainted with grief in a lot of different aspects, except myself. And so I'm excited to hear what you can share with us on today because I too understand grief as well. But when I began to research the effects of grief and how you can experience trauma, it literally blew my mind. I couldn't believe the stuff that I was reading. So I have a question that I want to ask you. So when we talk about grief and how it can feel like you can begin to feel panicky and numbness or just different things that are acquainted with the numbness that can happen. And we can say, oh, it's just grief, but really it's not just grief. So when we talk about trauma, what does trauma do to the nervous system? What does it do to the brain?
Wow. Well, I like to coin the phrase, it's an African proverb that says, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. And the reason I coined that phrase, that African proverb, because it's true. The axe is a tool that was designed to cut down, but the tree is designed to live. And it always remembers. The axe doesn't think about the cutting and hurting, the affliction, the trauma that it causes, but the tree always remembers. And I that to the brain. Even though we'll suppress things, our brain always remembers that trauma like the tree. So it stores it as a safety mechanism. It puts it away so that you were speaking about the numbness. It our brain is such a computer. It's such a fascinating muscle because it stores all that information just in case we need it. And numbness is a safety mechanism or a protection mechanism so that our brain is not overwhelmed or overloaded. So we literally shut down. That's different stages of grief. One of the stages, well, the initial stage of grief is shock and anger.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes with that shock, the body goes numb, the brain goes numb because it's trying to protect us and store us and keep us from being overwhelmed and being shut down.
Wow, that's something because I remember when my husband passed away, and when I first got the news, I immediately went into shock.
Yeah.
I went into shock, and then I went into from shock to saying, how is my daughter going to handle this? I started asking all of these different questions. I didn't even cry immediately because I was in total disbelief of the news, right? And so I know that that really does do something to your body. So much so that people will look at you and they'll be like, "Oh, you're so strong. You seem to be doing so good. If this was me, I'd be crumbling. Or I wouldn't be able to handle it." However, when it hits you, you know what I mean? And it will
Yes.
hit you unexpectedly. You don't even realize what's about to happen until it hits you and you're like, "Oh my God." And so, how can someone tell the difference between healthy grief and grief that's becoming complicated by the trauma?
Well, let me first say the symptoms of grief. You mentioned the numbness. That's perfectly normal. People that deal with grief, they can be angry at other people. They can even be angry at God. And that is actually a normal reaction. A person can feel overwhelmed. They could feel loss, despair. They can even feel suicidal. And I'm going to repeat that. I don't want people to feel that if a person feels suicidal that they're crazy. It is really actually a common thought when a person is dealing with grief. It's a normal reaction. So when a person is, we shares cause of concern is when a person is thinking or contemplating suicide, or they're contemplating hurting themselves, or doing destructive behavior, trying to numb that pain, whether taking drugs or alcohol or just things to numb it, or they're doing destructive behavior. They could, for example, being careless, leaving something on the stove unattended, or they get in the car and they leave the car running. They're just very forgetful. So that's when we really have to concern ourselves with that person at that time and really be present and help them during that process of grief, because really your brain is trying to protect itself. It's really shutting down, and it's a protection mechanism. People don't realize that. So it's so key to be present when a person is grieving so that they can go through the grieving process safely. And it's a normal process to check out, to be numb, to be depressed, and just can't get through the day. It's normal because this is a life altering event.
That's so awesome what you're sharing. And I'm a part of a grief group. And I've heard people make the comments, especially when it's immediate loss, that they'll say, "I don't want to live again." And I know that that can be a common theme because I think for me personally, if it wasn't for me having someone else to care for, my daughter was still here, that was what was giving me the reason to want to keep pushing through. But some people may not have that. They may not have a reason. And so it's easy for them to feel like, "Man, I don't want to live anymore. Please just take me." And even feeling the anger with God. Why did you do this? I asked that question. Why did you do this? When you've healed before, when you brought people back before, when you've done all of these miracles, and I know that you can, but you made a choice, you made a decision to say no. And so it can really truly break your heart. And so, what would you say to that person that really truly is feeling suicidal? We may have some people that's watching right now that will begin to feel like, "I don't want to live again, and I don't even want to be bothered with anybody. And I'm not really just expressing it, but I'm thinking the thoughts." What would you say to someone like that?
Well, first, I would say that you're not alone and that I love you. And I purpose that I would really love you for you to live. Of course, I don't want you to do anything. But one thing, I would say one misconception people have about suicide or thoughts of suicide is that if you talk about it, that you're giving the person the idea to do it. If a person has already thought about it and they start to communicate that they're having thoughts of that, the best thing to do is to talk about it, is to really get that person to talk about it and really get specifics on if they're planning to do it, how they plan to do it, and really get an idea so that you can help them and intercede for them and intercept those thoughts. And let's say a person is thinking about taking pills, or I'm thinking about leaving tomorrow at 6 o'clock. I'm going to leave a note for my family and I'm going to do this to myself. Well, you want to talk that through with them. And because a person that is suicidal, they're just not thinking about the after effect or how it'll affect everyone else. They're just trying to numb the pain. They're just trying to rest and stop those tormenting thoughts. So the best thing that we can do is be present in that time and talk to the person and get them to communicate. I've seen so many, especially in the last few years, celebrities, and I just think it's so sad that have ended their life because no one could discern that that person was suicidal. They were laughing, they were on camera, they were on social media, and nobody knew. No one could discern that this person was thinking about ending their life. But later on, they found notes, they found cryptic messages. But that's that time when people see that and something doesn't feel right. That's that time really to ask that person, hey, what's going on? Are you doing all right? I noticed you said this, or I noticed you put something on social media. I noticed that you're not yourself. And get them to talk about it. That the worst thing you can do help a suicidal person is not say anything and to allow them to sit in those thoughts and those feelings.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's funny because I think that's one of the most untalked about subject matters,
Yeah,
really.
taboo.
Because it's like, well, what do I say? Maybe they're not going to do anything. You know what I'm saying? But you're right. There are so many people that are hurting, and so many people are hurting, suffering silently. And what I'm hearing you say is we got to increase our discernment so that we can understand and have compassion. And one of the things I wanted to say, what do you say to that person who says, you've been grieving too long, it's time for you to get over it,
Oh,
it's time for you to move on? Because I hear that a lot. Who knows, I may have even been guilty of it myself or thinking the thought, you
me
know what I
too.
mean?
Yeah.
When it wasn't me, until the shoe was on the other foot. And then here I am experiencing grief. And I'm like, y'all don't see what's going on with me?
Oh God, Tonette, there's no amount of time. Really, grief is love with no place to land. That's
Mm,
all it is. You will never stop loving someone. It's like you're, so when people say, well, you should be over it by now, that's another misconception. It's just like my mother and father passed in 2002 and 2003. And I'll just share a quick story. My younger sister, I moved out of state. My younger sister asked for a copy of my mother's obituary because she didn't have a copy of it. And I said, oh, well, let me find it in mom's chest. So I have a chest with all of my mother's things, all of my father's things, their obituary, their casket key, things like that. So I opened up the chest. I haven't opened it in 20 years. They died in 2002 and 2003. And I tell you, Tonette, when I opened up that chest and I pulled out all the contents of it, one of them, my mother used to wear a lot of t-shirts with different sayings on them, like funny sayings. And one of my mother's t-shirts was in the chest. And I lifted up the shirt and I looked at to see what the shirt says. And when I tell you, I pulled that shirt up, I could smell my mother. It wasn't perfume. My mother had a scent. And I tell you, I just broke down. And this is almost 25, 23 years later. I'm still mourning. So there's never going to stop. Am I doing better with the grief? Of course. Time helps, but you always grieve. I will never stop loving my mother. I will never stop loving my father. I will never forget her scent. I will never forget her laugh. All those things, that's a trigger. Smells and memories come back into play. So as we go through life's journey with our loved ones, we think about those things and it's normal. It's normal to love someone. Your love will never end. Your love for your husband, that will never end. It's just right now, it's like you're throwing your love into the atmosphere and you're waiting. It's frustrating because you're waiting for them to receive it. So
um,
that's great.
I've never heard that before. One of the things I learned about it was actually in grief share. I went through grief share very early on, and it's so funny. I actually started becoming a grief share facilitator, and have been facilitating. I believe I started in 2022, which is the same year that my husband passed away. And one of the things that made me join is I knew I needed to go through counseling, and I think that's one of the things that we all need to know that it's okay to do. Get you some help, talk to somebody. Yeah. And so I had several people send that to me. So I remember thinking, I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to be stuck. Because part of me felt like, let me just say this, if you knew who my husband was, you would have known he would have been behind me saying, look, girl, get up. You cannot stay down like this. Get up. Stop crying. Get up and do something. You don't do that. And so I just kept hearing that in my head and knowing that God still had a plan for my life. And I just kept saying, God, I don't want to be stuck. So my first day of grief met, their topic was unstuck or being stuck. And I was like, oh my God. And it was exactly what I needed. But it was also the first time that I heard somebody say, you haven't grieved unless you loved. When you love deeply, you grieve. And so I can say this to anybody that is listening, that if you're grieving right now, it's because you love the person that passed away. It's your loved one. And it's not a strange thing to grieve because you love that person that is no longer with you. And so to tell anybody, move on, get over it. Yes, God doesn't want us to be stuck. He wants us to continue on because as long as we have breath in our bodies, that means he still has a plan for our lives. And that person who's gone on has fulfilled theirs. As bad as it hurts, they still have fulfilled theirs. But for me or for you, we're here because God says there's something else I need from you. And so just being able to say, take these deep breaths and get the resources that are available for us so that we can heal properly and not be in a place where we are suicidal and we carry it out. Because that's what we don't want. We don't want to be in a place where we feel like life can't go on because the loved one is gone. We want to be able to say, yes, I can do it. I can keep moving. Even picking up the broken pieces, I can still go. So another question I have is, when we talk about trauma, what are some common trauma responses that you see when people are grieving? So we're hitting on the emotional part, but what about the physical and the spiritual part that they may not even realize is trauma related?
That's a really good question. Normally, well, the physical response, people can be physically ill. The physical response to it, because again, your brain is trying to protect your body, trying to cover you and protect you from that memory. It's storing it, but it's saying, hey, let me go here. This is too overwhelming. Stay back here. So it can develop in forms of PTSD, like I was speaking about earlier, those triggers where a person is feeling anxious all the time. They have stomach aches, they have severe headaches, just like a physical response, or just feel like something is physically wrong with them, just having pseudo symptoms. Nothing's wrong, but it's the body saying, hey, it's sending signals down through the nervous system saying, hey, I'm in fight or flight, something is happening. And it's to protect us. So when a person is going through trauma, recognizing that is very important, because having too much of that response in the body can raise the cortisol levels. And oddly enough, a lot of people that have diabetes and different diseases like that stems from stress, stems from trauma. Because when too much cortisol hits the body, that's right next to your kidneys. It's sending off a signal to say, insulin, I need, it's your body is just sending out that signal, I need to basically get ready to fight or to protect myself. But too much of that is debilitating the body, is harming the body. People don't even realize that cancer, even that response continually when people have high stress and trauma, it directly affects them. So it's really important to understand that a person is under feeling trauma and to get that help that they need. When we think about a scar, if a person, well, I should say even normalizing trauma. And I'm glad that mental health and even platforms like this are normalizing what trauma is. Because in days past, we didn't talk about those things. We just basically said, well, what stays in my house. But now putting language to it and saying, hey, something's wrong. Let's talk about this. If you had a cut on your arm and you were bleeding, someone would normally say, hey, go to the hospital, get that check, get it bandaged up. But when a person is dealing with trauma, we typically don't do that. We're getting better at that, but we need to normalize, hey, I see you're in trauma. You have a heart wound. You're bleeding out. And how do heart wounds react? How do you know when a person is bleeding out from their emotions? It comes out in their behavior. A person's anxious, they're angry, they're lonely, they're depressed. That's how it comes out. If I had a cut on my arm, you can visibly see it. You can visibly see the cut. You can see if I have an infection. What does infection look like for a person that's dealing with trauma? Well, it might be someone that's just having toxic behavior. That's an infection. So we have to recognize that and get that person the help that they need and normalize that people need mental health. And everything is not a spirit. Hey, evangelist, everything is not a spirit. Some things need medication. Some things need professional medical help.
Yes.
And we got to normalize that.
That's so good. I'm so glad you said that because we can be the first people to say, oh,
That's the
get it
demon.
out of them and all of those things when really
It's trauma.
they're dealing with trauma.
If a
And
pill could fix it, it's not a demon. I'm sorry.
look, I'm glad you said that too because look, when I went through Christian counseling and I remember the ladies, the instructor, she said if a person is dealing with, let's just say for instance, they have a spirit, right? But then they also have mental issues. She said, give them their medication.
Right?
They need to take their medication so that they are mentally stable enough to hear what you're saying so you can deal with another issue that they have. But if you only just want to deal with the spiritual aspect and not deal with the natural and what's going on, then they can totally just miss whatever. You won't give them the fullness of everything. And then granted, sometimes it's not even a spirit at all. They just need the medication to control their mind and their mental psyche and how they can handle pressure.
Yeah.
There are many people that I've heard of when they lose a loved one, if they're grieving, right? Then it can start to make them push people away because they're dealing with their emotions. They don't even know how to handle it.
We put a language to it.
They can't. And I remember that happening with me. Me and my daughter would be like this, just going at it with each other because both of us were dealing with the effects of it and we didn't know what to do. And we would lash out at each other. Sometimes it would be at different times. It would either be her or one day it might be me. And then one day it might be both of us. Until we finally had to decide, look, this is how we're going to handle this situation. If you're dealing with something that it's not really me that's done anything to you, or I'm talking and I'm not really calm in my conversation, take a deep breath, step away, and then we just come back and discuss it later. And so we made that pact, and I promise you guys, truly, it helped our relationship. It helped us to respect one another's boundaries and respect one another in how we were grieving. Because guess what? Everybody doesn't grieve the same.
I was gonna just about to say that because your daughter, she's at a different mental capacity. She's at different stages of grief and her maturity as well. So dealing with that in adolescence, I'm not sure how old your daughter is now, but they typically act out. So what a lot of people say, oh, that's a bad kid or that's a bad teenager, and they're really acting out. And I had to come to terms with that with my own daughter. Even recently, she was kind of doing some things acting out. Well, when I had my trauma, I had to think about it. She was around 12 years old. That's when I was hospitalized and went through a lot. But developmentally, when a person deals with trauma, especially young people, children, their development stops at their trauma. So their emotional intelligence stops at that point. So sometimes I would be frustrated and say, why can't you just clean up your room? You're too old for that. Because now my daughter is 17 years old. Why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And, I'm just like, I feel like I'm talking to a little child sometimes. And I would say that sometimes, you're not a little baby. Come on, grow up. And I tell you, Tony, the Holy Spirit said, but she's not. She's 12. I was like, wow. What do you mean, Lord? And I know this because I do this, I train this. And I said, God, you're right, because I know this, but it's my daughter, so I just couldn't put the two together. But it stopped when she was 12. When she stopped her development, it literally stopped when she was 12. So just offering grace and having understanding of, I'm dealing now with a 17-year-old senior in high school. I'm dealing with a 12-year-old middle school. So I have to train her and teach her. I have to have more patience with her in that area. She's not a bad kid. She's just in trauma. She's dealing with the after effects of trauma. Now, this is 5 years later. So we're working through it.
That's awesome. My daughter was 18 at the time that my husband passed away. But one thing I had to realize, even in that situation, is that I lost a husband, but she lost a dad. So those are still two different types of losses, even though it's the same person. She lost a dad. So when you lose someone, we lose them and we deal with the grief totally different because of the way that person's loss affects us. People say you can get another husband, but you can't get another dad. You can't get another child, even though you can go have another one. You can't get that one back. So there's different types of the way we grieve, and especially depending on the individual and, like you said, the age of the person. My daughter has matured and a lot of things have changed with her since then. She even got the counseling and different things that she needed, which was also helpful. But before we go, I want you to, if you could recommend any practical coping tools that can help somebody if they're triggered at nighttime. Maybe triggered, this is during the holidays, and during the holidays, it's very difficult. People are dealing with not having their loved one there. I heard a lady say she fixed dinner for Thanksgiving. This was just this past Thanksgiving, and she set a plate still at the table that was empty, and it broke her heart. So, what are some ways that you would tell our audience that they can cope during this time of holidays, and even just some tools, or even when they're triggered by the loss at night? Because sometimes people have trouble sleeping. A lot of people do. I have trouble sleeping. I could not sleep. I would literally be up all night for hours and hours to 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, maybe sleep one or two. It was every little noise I was shaking. Holiday time came, I chose not to even stay home. I was like, I got to get out of here. So we left town because it was an easy scapegoat to not have to. And those things I think are still okay if that's what you choose to do. Whatever you got to do to cope. That was my method of coping. So, what could you share with our audience on what they could do to cope during this time, especially the holidays or when they're triggered?
Well, it's popular belief, lean into it, lean into the grief. Because sometimes what we do is we suppress it and it kind of bubbles up. So even leaning into that, sometimes when you feel like I'm feeling a moment, I feel triggered, thinking about that person, loving that person, thinking about the good memories, that helps sometimes. If that's too overwhelming, pause and really breathe. Just sit. One thing about deep breathing is that it really helps the body. It helps calm you down. It brings your heart rate down. It has so many benefits. Just deep breathing for 5 minutes. It actually expands your lungs. It lowers your heart rate and it recenters you and gets your thoughts off being overwhelmed at that moment. So just sitting still and just sitting in a chair and just deep breathing in a relaxed position, just really calming yourself down. And if you can, just really center yourself with a good support system. Just if you can, I know everyone is blessed to have that. But if you're able to have that, really have that tribe with you and support you in that moment. But if you're alone, really do those breathing exercises. Breathe deep from your diaphragm and blow out like you're blowing a balloon. Deep inhale like you're taking in a flower and exhale like you're blowing out a balloon. Deeply over and over again. but that helps a lot. But in the long term, I would say don't suppress those thoughts. Really have your support system. Think about your support system if you can and talk about it. That's the best thing you can do is really love. Don't lean into the grief. There's a thing called good grief. And it's really like allowing yourself to sit in those thoughts of loss, the memories that you have for that person, and love them. It's perfectly, and it's okay to cry.
Yes, that's really good. And I also wanted to add to that, and you tell me if this even makes a difference. What about thinking about the people who are still living? In a sense of dealing with what you are dealing with, but also thinking about, for instance, if you have a child, if you still have children with you, how can you pull them in as well to make sure that they're healing properly or that you're not forgetting about them while you're grieving?
Allow yourself to grieve. I mean, we coined that phrase all the time. When we're on the airplane, put the mask on first. How can you really love? You were married to your husband, I'm using you as an example. He was your love first. So allowing yourself that time to love your husband, that sacred place with him, all the memories you have with him, and then allow because you have grief too, and it's not selfish. It's really allowing that covering, and that's being the best mother that you can be to your daughter, is to allow your grief, your love for your husband to be released.
That's good. I'm glad you said that. She did not, y'all hear that? She did not give the church response. Just kicked all of the religious boundaries out of the window. That is so good because you know what? That's what I did. I went through counseling. She came to one and left. She didn't even be a part of Grief Share. But later on, I told her whenever she was ready, if she want to go to counseling, she did a totally different type of counseling. She went to go see an actual therapist, and it was better for her. And so she was able to communicate and release and heal a different way than I did. And you're right, it made us come together and be good for each other.
Yeah,
But you're
that's a
right.
totally different dynamic because your child is going to, it's kind of hard for a child to protect you in that moment when they can't feel like I can grieve because I got to protect mom. I don't want to see her. So just allowing yourself to be present in that grief, the good grief, and then come back and then you can console your daughter.
That's so good. One of the things she shared with me, and this may be happening to you or your children, you listeners, was that so many people was telling her, be strong for your mom. Be strong for her. And so she really didn't like that. But because part of her didn't want to be strong. So she and I had a pact. It was like, hey, if you want to cry, if you want to scream, you want to throw a couple of things, that's fine. Just don't tear nothing up. And don't hit me. But if you need a moment, if you need to
Yeah.
go let it out, just go let it out. And
Mhm.
but part of that was making her feel like she didn't want to let me see her cry. She didn't want to let me, she wanted to be strong. And so at one point I was kind of worried about her because I was like, you need an outlet just like I do. But I let her wait for her timing of when she felt like she needed that outlet. So when she got her a therapist that she could talk to and communicate, it was a blessing. It helped her and it truly lifted all of the things. Because we're dealing with, you could be dealing with depression and don't know it. You could be dealing with the anxiety and the fears, and all of these things are stemming from the trauma. Like you said, you go into a fight or flight, tech mode. And so all of these things are very key. So I truly appreciate you sharing. Do you have one last thought that you want to say to the audience before we go?
Thank you for this opportunity. But I think the last thing I would say is that allow yourself to grieve. Just lean into that, the love that's left, but it's still here. It's still there. So just lean into that and just continue to love. That's all grief is.
Wow. All right, you guys, you heard it from our certified trauma healing counselor, Erica Fulbright. So if you guys are looking for someone that can help you through your trauma with learning how to deal with it, how can they get in touch with you, Erica?
Well, they can contact me on my website or they can hit me up on my email, but my website is heramazingtestimony.org. That's my ministry, but on my website, there are different links for trauma healing for the ministry. You'll see a link that says trauma healing. You can sign up for that. We have some trauma healing classes that are coming up. Matter of fact, we have some for teens coming up in January. So,
Oh, awesome.
looking
That's
forward to
so
that.
great. So I'm going to put that link. It'll be, excuse me, in the description. So you guys are welcome to join the trauma class. And also, I'm going to be opening up a group coaching for grief for those who are maybe grieving and you want to be a part of a community where you can join as well. I mean, that's going to be open up and actually starting in January as well, but we'll make sure they're not on the same day because you may want to do both of them. But I think one of the things you pointed out was community. Community is so important in having a safe space that you can go. Grief share is also another good plan, but sometimes after grief share is 13 weeks, and then it's like, what's next? I'm still needing something else. And so there are awesome organizations or places that you can go that can assist you. So you have Erica, evangelist, she's an evangelist as well. And then you have myself. We're both faith based, but we also know how to speak from a professional standpoint and give advice where it's needed. But I'm not a doctor, and so I don't diagnose and I don't treat any illnesses or anything like that. But like I said before, I can definitely tell you what it means to heal and how you can go through the process of healing. Amen. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we're going to have Erica back. And so we're so excited that she took
Oh,
the time out. We're going to have her back again on next week. So until we feel the release from this series, we're going to have her back again. And so you guys just stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you're following and turning on your notifications so that you will know when we go live. And I say to you, woman, arise. It's not too late. God still has a plan for your life. As long as you have breath in your lungs, there it is not over. And I want you to know that you are not alone. See you again on next week. Y'all be blessed.